Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 150.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
It's Keith Parsons again with Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, and today I've got Rick Steiner with me. Rick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Keith. How are you?
Very good. We were just discussing offline a minute ago that you live in Camino Island up in the Puget Sound.
That's correct.
This is the part of the year where it's actually good to live in Washington.
Yeah, unfortunately, we get visitors that come up here and they see this time of the year and the weather, and they forget about the other 9 months of the year that we have for just nothing but clouds and rain.
Oh, I thought it was 10, but anyway, yeah.
Well, 9, 10, it varies between the years, but yeah, it's definitely, there's a long stretch that a lot of people don't realize because they come up here during the summertime and it looks beautiful and it's green and, you know, great temperatures and sunshine, and they just forget about the rest of the year. So they tend to want to move up here just because of the 3 months that we get, and then the rest of the year it's kind of crappy weather.
But it's what makes everything green.
Yes, for the most part. For the most part, it does.
Well, I'm glad you could join us today. I thought you'd mentioned you did some work with the WLPC to do some troubleshooting, and I thought it'd be a great topic for our listeners to hear the little story of how you used the little device and what was the process and what was your end results and your feedback on that. So, do you mind telling us the story there?
Sure, absolutely. So, well, we're all aware of the WLAN-PI and some of the tools that Jerry had loaded onto the device. And in this particular case, I was brought in to troubleshoot an actual closed network. It was going to be used to run large video wall screens. And so what this network does is it basically connects up via UDP for the video and the audio, but it uses TCP for the control connections to set up the timings between each of the screens and that type of stuff so that it looks like the entire video wall changes at the same time. Well, the challenge that they were having was the video and the audio, first of all, was dropping off occasionally at random times. And then the other piece that they had is the boxes that they were having, the encoders and decoders, they would randomly drop off as well to where they couldn't connect to them and manage them through an HTML interface. So I know it's not wireless. They did have a wireless component to it as well, and they were trying to determine whether or not the wireless was potentially causing the problem or what have you. But so what I did is I brought a couple of WLAN-PIs that I have, and I've been just itching to use them in a field environment. So I brought them in, and the first thing that I did is I popped one up and I connected to it locally and using the Kismet developer edition that was loaded. I used that to take a look at the traffic in the environment coming off of the access point and making sure that there wasn't anything specific that was coming from the AP or that was in the environment itself that could be causing issues. And
so just to back up there, okay. To use Kismet, you have to add a Wi-Fi NIC, a USB NIC to that. Which NIC were you using?
I actually added the Comfast 1200. I have been looking at that adapter or adapters like that because one of the things that I'm finding in the industry and in with a lot of my clients is that with the use of AC and my clients want to channel bond the channels to get the higher throughput rates, and so what they're having to do is open up the DFS channels. And one of the challenges that we have is, even though there are some AC adapters out there, like the ASUS AC56, I think it is, unfortunately the driver that supports it in the hardware does not include any of the DFS frequencies, the Uni2 section. So I searched a lot for an adapter that would actually work, and it turns out that the Comfast 1200 was both price competitive, but it also covers pretty much everything that we use on the 5 gig side in the US.
Well, good. Yeah, I was just wanted to emphasize the little box itself doesn't have I mean, Kismet can run, but it doesn't have any input without putting a Wi-Fi NIC in. So go on with your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, Nigel and I had worked a little bit on utilizing it as a packet capture device directly connected to a laptop using the automatic private addressing space. So that he gets a shout out for giving me a little indication as to what to use there. But anyway, so after using Kismet for a little bit and continuing using it to monitor the Wi-Fi to make sure there wasn't anything that popped up kind of strange, I took my other unit that I had and I plugged it into the switches, and then I started sending through iPerf2. I started sending tests, 60-second tests of UDP packets, and then following that up with TCP packets. And one of the things that I noticed was that the UDP packets were going through just fine, but the TCP packets were bouncing all over the place, and the throughput that was going through was not even close to what I expected to see. And so I switched over to the wired side and performed the same tests, and I found that the UDP packets, again, were flowing freely, but the TCP packets were having difficulties. I mean, I was getting off of a gigabit switch network. I was barely getting 1 megabit of throughput per second.
So to set this up, you took the Pi, hooked it up to its Ethernet port, then you're talking to it and controlling it, and you're configuring the iPerf2 with specific triggers to change TCP, UDP, etc.
Exactly. And mainly what I wanted to see if the packets were flowing freely throughout the network to sort of eliminate what the switch might have been doing that could have been impacting the network's performance.
So you found UDP was happy and TCP was not happy.
That's correct. And that sort of validated what the client device was actually, or the client was telling me, where they would get audio and video and everything was fine, but their connectivity as far as the management was concerned was starting to drop off as well. As I was doing this test, I went into the switches. I was given admin access into the switches, and I found that there was uplinks. They had done some port channeling, and they had put together 3 or 4 different uplinks over fiber links, and it wasn't balancing the 4 ports in the port channel. It wasn't balancing them correctly. Like one would end up being oversubscribed versus the other 2 or 3. And when that happened, it would start, the switches themselves would start registering lost packets. So to kind of wrap this up in terms of the story, I was able to go in and turn on a feature that the switches had called Tcp Congestion Avoidance. And by turning that on, it actually leveled everything out so that my throughput on the TCP tests through the iPerf2 went from less than 1 megabit per second up to almost 800 megabits per second. A huge difference.
Thus again, it wasn't wireless.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't the wireless.
But your process was, I mean, you started on the wireless side. You did a test. Part of it worked, part of it didn't. So you moved upstream to find out where it was.
Exactly.
Good troubleshooting technique.
Well, thank you.
So you fixed it on the wired side, went back and retested the wireless?
Yes. And actually, that particular access point, its performance was a little less than stellar, and I kind of mentioned that to them. It was just a small business access point. It wasn't one of our typical enterprise classes, so I think it was getting a little overdriven on its CPU side. But the doing a spectrum analysis with Metageek channelizer, I was able to tell that it wasn't the RF spectrum itself. The spectrum came back really clean. The utilization was very low, so it wasn't anything dealing with that. It was actually the access point itself that seemed to be having some problems traversing the packets between the wireless and the wired.
So you got 800 on the wired side of the AP. What were you getting on the wireless side?
On the UDP packets, or the UDP packets were flowing just as quickly as as what the switches were allowing on the other side, because this was a multicast kind of scenario. But as far as the TCP packets, I was getting somewhere around 10 to 20 megs. I would have expected a little bit more, but it was sufficient for what they were going to use the wireless for, which was the command and control part.
And yet, when you looked at the spectrum, it was not oversaturating the spectrum.
No, not at all. And actually, there was the area that it's in. There was a separate system that was surrounding this particular room, and they were concerned about what might have been interfering with what's going on. And so I was able to find a couple of channels that were not in use by the other system and be able to set the two access points that were within this space statically assigned to those two channels to try and avoid any interference from the existing system outside the room versus the APs that were in the room.
And even after finding a clean channel, there was still lots of extra headroom in the RF spectrum.
Well, in terms of the extra, the channel utilization was like less than 5%. So overall, even when doing the test. So the challenge actually was the access point itself. It was a more of a, I won't say a commercial, or just a lower end AP. Realistically, I probably wouldn't have picked the model, but this wasn't my system. So
yeah, that's one of those ones where I should have brought a spare just so I could prove that take the next step, swap that out, put in an enterprise class, and give it a run, and say, oh yeah, this is what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But realistically, what they were using the wireless for was just for troubleshooting purposes and access into the system without having to be standing in the computer room itself with all the fans and noise.
So you used two WLAN-Pis as both of your endpoints. You used one as a test, and one was the client, one was the server.
No, actually, the one that was in the server room used as the server side, and for the client side, I was using my laptop.
Oh, okay. I just heard you had two of them. So
yeah, the one was monitoring the wireless from the Kismet.
Oh yeah, one had Kismet on. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
So do you see any other situations or environments where you might need two or more?
Actually, I've been doing some testing on using the WLAN-Pi, because one of the things that has been kind of difficult with a Windows box is doing any kind of packet capturing. You either need like high-end programs, special drivers, etc. So one of the things I've been playing with is taking the WLAN-Pis, using them as the brains, and with Wi-Fi Nigel's code, basically grabbing the TCP dump from the WLAN-Pis and dumping it into Wireshark in my laptop when connected.
And then just let the laptop do all the. Do you do that live, or you do like a store and forward?
I do it live for now, but store and forward would be nice too. At this point, as far as the live piece goes, I've been trying to figure out how to capture multiple channels, and for each channel you need a separate adapter. So in my testing, I've been able to use the WLAN-Pi with a hub, and I actually successfully did up to 6 all at once off of one Pi. But I'm a little concerned about overhead with the Pi itself and collecting the data.
So six NICs?
Yes.
Into a hub, into the USB port in the Pi, capturing each one on a different channel.
Correct.
I'm impressed. You need a blog post on that one.
I actually have been thinking about writing it, but I'm not quite done with making sure what's going on with it. I'm not quite sure I trust all 6. So I've actually backed it down to where I think 3 would be a good number for right now, especially in a busy network, because my testing was on a network that isn't really all that busy. So I think with a busier network, it would provide a lot more overhead on the Pi and stress it out a lot more. So I still have to test that part.
Yeah, I wonder if multiple NICs are going to, you might actually fill the USB speed, 1, and then 2, you could, with 6 of them, you could overrun even the gig Ethernet if they were on different channels. And they're just collecting data. They're not pushing data.
Yeah, exactly. But I did have concern with the USB being able to process all of those packets coming in, especially in a really big high-speed network. Thankfully, though, I don't run across too many of those right now because a lot of our clients haven't really moved to using AC completely yet. So most of them are still doing 802.11n, and since we support a lot of enterprise clients, we're dealing with just 20 meg wide channels and that kind of stuff.
Good. So do you have any plans of getting any more WLPIs?
Actually, I picked up 2 more, not from the original, or not from you guys, from your store. I actually bought them from the original vendor when they switched over to
Just from Friendly Electric?
Yes, Friendly Electric. When they switched over to their long-term solution, once the 1 gig came out in the kit form with the nice metal case and everything, I picked up 2 more of those. So right now I have 4 of them. I
know some guys who have, like, in their home labs, they might be testing Aruba and Cisco and Ubiquiti and Ruckus, and so they drop 1 behind each so they can do individual tests on any segment of the network. Well,
that sounds like a really cool idea, and I haven't quite gotten to the point where I figured out exactly what I'm going to do with those just yet. But
they're a nice resource.
There's so many different possibilities to play with this. There are so many different tools and things that Jerry thankfully added to the device. And he just put out his update, by the way.
Yeah, he just came out with 1.3. Yeah, I just installed it yesterday myself.
I haven't done that. I've got it downloaded, but I haven't had a chance to actually put it on the cards yet.
So you're a Windows guy, not a Mac guy?
Unfortunately, because the program that we use Air Magnet primarily for our survey gear. Unfortunately, I'm kind of stuck to the Windows platform.
Well, you can always run Air Magnet on a Mac. I did it for a long time. So boot camp's for. But the reason I asked that question is on Mac, I run a tool called Etcher, which is really simple for putting, copying the image over onto the SD card. Like a couple clicks and it's done, and it works every single time. One of the things we found in burning those is not all SD card readers, like a USB B to a SD reader, are created equal. The one we came up with our Odroids a couple years ago, called the Transcend, I have never had it not work. I was sitting here and just forgot to go in the other room. I just grabbed another SD reader and went, I'll just use this. And thought for a minute it was Etcher failing, and really it was just as soon as I swapped back and put it in the Transcend, it worked perfect every time. So I was wondering what you use on Windows to burn those images.
Well, I've actually used Etcher on Windows, and I was at WLPC 2017 when the Odroid came out, and I was able to sit in the maker session and pick up the Transcend. So that is the exact same setup that I use on the Windows box.
Oh, well, okay then. I was just thought you might have found some better technique, but Etcher and the Transcend adapter works really well for updating those. The other thing we found, just I don't know if you've been around, we've been doing this Odroid thing for a couple of years with Jerry and WLPCs, and it's way, way better than it used to be. We thought we wanted bigger SD cards. And what we found was the bigger the SD card, the harder it was to image them. Mm-hmm. And 8 gig just became the sweet spot. And so it's really easy to have a small image, only a couple of gig, push it to an 8 gig, and it gives you lots of headroom to save stuff. And we found we didn't need much more. So that's why we're using the little 8s now.
Yeah, well, I just playing with some Raspberry Pis with NetBees not too long ago, I kind of fell into that trap thinking, yeah, bigger card, better, kind of the Tim Allen, more power type of idea. But that didn't work so well. 8 gig does seem to be the sweet spot from my experience. And I'm really liking the industrial cards versus the normal ones.
I just picked up a 5-pack of those industrials. They were kind of hard to come by for a while, but now they just have them in stock on Amazon. So
they do
switched out because they work really well, and they just hang in there.
Oh wow, okay, so they are on Amazon, because I've been looking to try and find a place for purchasing them, because I like those better than the standard ones that are for sale.
I think if I remember right, it was $45 for a 5-pack.
Ah, perfect. I'll have to look that up. Thank you for the tip.
Yeah, and now you got 4 of them to play with.
Yeah.
Well, anything else you plan on doing with the WLPIs to play with in your career?
Well, one of the things that I have done in the past is I've done some trainings, and I think after playing around with FreeRadius here recently on an Intel NUC, I might think about adding it as a piece to the Pi, just to be able to have a small server, portable server to drag around with me that's low powered. Of course, it wouldn't be for a production network. It would only be for labs and training space. But I'm thinking about doing that.
Well, sometimes you just need something to answer. Send a request, do a little quick lookup, and give you back an answer.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're trying to demonstrate what 802.1x and Radius actually do for either clients or training classes, whatever.
I was thinking doing the same thing, but with just a baby DHCP server, or maybe a mail server that sits there that you can just set up in a classroom and just hit it to pretend you're sending it to the internet mail, but just so that like for notifications when you want to send an email, you don't actually want to leave and send real email. You just want to have it go close.
Yeah, well, it gives you a portable option that is higher powered than a lot of its competitors, and it's just, again, it's an amazing little tool. I'm been very impressed with it, and I'm very thankful to Jerry for putting it together, for you guys for putting it together, and I think it's a great little handy tool to put in your little bag, and we'll just have to see what other things we can add to it. But I'm also finding that from a Linux standpoint, in the Linux world, there's a lot of things out there, a lot of tools, a lot of opportunity for anyone who is just breaking into it, because again, like you pointed out, I'm a Windows guy, so there's just a whole world of possibilities that I haven't even tapped yet in terms of ideas. So
are you a battery operated WLAN-Pi, or are you a PoE injector guy?
I'm actually kind of both. I have battery packs that will run it. I am also aware that I can run it off of my laptop too. That's actually what I did, is I ran the power off the laptop at the same time that I was collecting on the Ethernet side at this last engagement. But I also have some PoE splitters, some gigabit PoE splitters that I picked up on Amazon. And
they're pretty cheap. You can get like $15 and you can get a 5-volt draw off of PoE.
Oh yeah, even just standard PoE AF can pull it. And I also actually found another one, because I was looking at designing a small box to basically drop in as a remote probe device, and the WLAN-Pi wasn't a part of that original design yet, but I was looking at a way to power it through PoE, and I actually found on Amazon a gigabit PoE splitter / switch, where you have the one input and it would actually split the PoE out to 2 gigabit ports, and it's full gigabit through the switch. And it's kind of interesting because it uses a PoE to power the switch, so you don't need anything other than the one PoE input to both power the switch as well as power what's behind it.
So you could use it where you only have one jack, and you need to add the thing that was on there plus your WLAN-Pi.
Yep, absolutely.
Good plan. Maybe I have to go. Amazon is our friend. We go search it for all sorts of cool things.
Yeah, that one I was actually thinking of doing. At the time, I was using an Aruba access point and doing some experiments with their spectrum analysis. And I was thinking it would be kind of cool to have like an Aruba AP that's in wrap mode, essentially, and something else doing packet capturing. And so I was looking around trying to figure out how could I get that accomplished, and I ran across that gigabit switch / PoE splitter.
So I think two comments. One, have you ever tried it with? Oh, you're not a Mac user, so you don't have Adrian Granados's Wi-Fi Explorer Pro.
No, I don't, and I keep hearing about it, and it's just the more that I'm sitting here in the industry and I'm seeing more and more, I'm starting to lean toward either Linux or Mac or both.
Well, probably both of them support native Wireshark, and that's a big you don't have to have these other things to do it. But that was leading me to my next questions about when you'd mentioned a remote sensor. I think WLAN-Pi has the ability, has the hardware and the capacity to be one of those things. You could even just mail it off someplace with a PoE splitter injector for the 5 volts and say, hey, just plug this in any port, and then you remotely come in and take a look and can do a bunch of analysis, either through Kismet or Wireshark. No one's built that yet, but I'm sure if individuals are doing it, Jerry can incorporate it in the master image.
Well, and that is exactly what I've been focused on. And I've actually been looking at doing like a reverse VPN using OpenVPN, where the device would drop onto the network, draw an IP address, and then automatically call home to create the connection into the client's network in that fashion.
Well, if you get that working, there's a bunch of people who would love you for it. And so, yes, full support to get that kind of a thing going.
I actually saw on, I think it was a Hack5 video where they used their land turtle, and they basically did exactly that, where the land turtle was on in their case, it was the subject network, and it called out to an OpenVPN server that was up in the cloud, and then they just signed into that same server and were able to gain access into the client network. So I'm probably going to pattern something after that, but obviously I got to use the WLAN-Pi as the basis of my my device.
Well, the WLAN-Pi has at least as much, or I'm thinking quite a bit more horsepower to be able to pull that off than a land turtle. So if they got the code working, it's just a matter of porting it over. I'm just not a Linux guy and can do that kind of port. So like you, I'm like really thrilled that Jerry did all this work.
Well, I'm still learning, and the more that I'm finding out, the more that I'm knowing that Windows is definitely not the way to go. Not to bust on them for anything. I mean, they're obviously, and here in America they use it a lot. A lot of companies use it, but I'm finding that that for educational purposes, Linux is definitely, it's a big learning curve, but if you're willing to tackle it, it's got a lot of great tools that are out there and a lot of great support from people that are just doing open source. Open source itself is just amazing.
Well, I appreciate your time sharing your story with us and how you used WLAN-Pi to actually do real world testing and troubleshooting. Any last words you have?
Other than just to thank you, first of all, for inviting me on, and for all the work that you do. I've attended the last WLPCs the last 2 years, and I've pretty much decided that I want to try and attend as many as I can in the future. So, and
we got one in Prague in the fall if you want to go to check.
That's a little far. Phoenix actually works out perfect for me. Obviously being on the West Coast, but I appreciate it.
And it's the middle of your gray season, so at least you can come down and get some sun.
You got it. Love that Phoenix weather, 75 degrees and sunny during that time of year. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm heading down there in a couple hours, and it's not quite 75. It's a little warmer.
Yeah, just a little bit. My parents actually live down in Scottsdale, so I get weather reports all the time.
Well, good deal. Well, Rick, thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Mentor Minute.
Well, Keith, we've got some questions that have come in. Just what are the things that people are struggling with as wireless LAN professionals? So first question, how do you talk to customers when their problem is caused by an automatic channel plan and a static channel plan will fix it?
Great question. I actually come across this quite often in my consulting when I meet with people. There's a lot of folks in the industry who will say, RM is bad. Others say static's the only way to go. I'm of the opinion that a well-implemented static plan can always beat an automatic plan. That's using a human rather than an algorithm to make decisions. On the other hand, it's very time-consuming, and it takes effort, and it takes a very skilled operator to be able to pull it off. So to answer this question, yes, static plans can be far, far better than a badly implemented automatic plan. On the other hand, if you really know what you're doing on the automatic plans, whether it's Cisco's RM or Aruba's ARM or anyone's automatic channel and transmit power, you have to learn those best. Probably about a year ago, not quite a year ago, 9 months ago or so, we had a podcast interview with Sam Clemens and Blake Croney talking about this very issue. And I'd recommend going back and listening to that. At WLPC, Blake Croney also gave a presentation on RRM. There's lots of people who really know how to tune RRM properly, and you can really make it sing. But I think the question that you ask in this about, how do you tell your customer how to fix it? One is, if the previous person installed it used just factory defaults coming off for RM, it's probably going to make some fairly blatant mistakes, and it'll look like a static plan is probably the easiest way to fix it. And if you're there on site with them, you can say, I can fix your stuff right now really quick. It's a one-time fix and it's static. It won't adapt to any changes in the future. If you would like, I can also tune your RM so that not only will it fix it today, it'll fix it in the future if there's any changes as well. So both techniques work, but either technique, either automatic or manual, you have to know what you're doing. So if you're a little hesitant and you don't feel confident in using the automatic, but you do feel confident in doing the static, go ahead and do the static. If you're going to ever do automatic, read up, learn what the algorithms are. What are the trigger points? How do you set them? What's the tuning process to go through to make your version of automatic work as good as possible in your environment? And not all environments are the same. So I guess the quick answer is talk to your customer and tell them what the issues are. Share as much information as you can at that point in time. If it's a quick fix, you can fix it right then with static. If you want a long-term adaptable fix, you probably want to tune their RM to meet their requirements.
10 Talks.
Hey, hi everyone. So I'm Neil Mack. There's some details about me. Keith's suggestion a couple of years ago in Maastricht was to be a mentor. So I've actually agreed to help out Xavier with the CWNA and Sebastian with CWAP. So if you want to follow our journey, thank you. A couple of people mentioned it. So if you want to follow our journey, just check in at the blog there. So when Keith asked me yesterday if I'd be interested in doing a talk, I was more than happy to do it because I think it's really important to contribute something back. But it was a very last-minute thing, and we weren't sure if we were going to get time. So thank you, Keith, for allowing me to do this. And, of course, it's because of efforts of Keith and Fernie and Matthew here especially, inspires people like me to try and give something back. And I think you guys have done a fantastic job. And if it hasn't been said before, I really want to take my hat off to you for everything you're doing. So, yeah, all right. So my line of work is training, and training is something that's not often discussed at events like this. So I was really pleased when Blake got up yesterday and spoke about his experiences of getting towards training and getting into training. And I want to say, with all the respect in the world to Blake, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the training community. But your journey as a trainer has just begun. And now what you should aim to be is a great trainer. So that is I'm not saying that you're not, but there's always room for excellence. So I'm going to talk now about the 3 things that a great trainer needs. Okay, why is it important to be a great trainer? Anyone? Why do you need to be a good trainer? You've all been on training courses. What does it mean to you to have the guy in front of you to be a good trainer? Why is it important? Well, these are questions that we need to ask ourselves as a trainer, because our job is more than just reading out PowerPoint slides. We have a moral, legal, ethical responsibility to transfer knowledge and to help people to go on and perform their job differently. Now, adults make judgments on everything they learn. They make a value judgment, and they need to assess what you're teaching them, and they need to hold it as valuable. And this is a subconscious thing. So it's up to our excellence to make sure that that message is held at the back of the mind. Now, great trainers bring content alive, and they encourage long-term attitude change. So my talk on 3 great things a trainer needs begins with credibility. The first thing you need when you are a trainer is credibility. So how do you gain credibility as a trainer? 2 things, qualification and certification. Qualification means you've spent time in the field working on installations. Let's aim this particular at Wi-Fi training. You've got that field experience so that when you stand up in front of an audience and talk about your Wi-Fi experiences, you've got that experience to back you up, because people look at that and they feel inspired by it. The second thing is you need to have qualifications. So if you're teaching on a particular subject, of course, you need to be qualified in that subject and certified in that subject. It's not good enough just to take an exam after doing a 5-day course and then try to teach it if that 5-day course was your very first exposure to it. So you need that long time experience. So I sum it up here. For example, for Wi-Fi training, credibility comes from your CWNA certifications. If you're going to be training for a vendor, for example, I think it's important to be CWNA. Or if you're training analysis tools, again, CWNA should be a minimum requirement. But also your trainer qualifications. So lots of trainers in this room, how many people are actually formally trained and have taken formal exams in being a trainer? Okay, perfect. This is just as important as your Wi-Fi knowledge. And then again, any other experiences that help towards your journey as a trainer. The second thing you need is great material. And I feel that that is the big failing within our community when I'm talking about trainers and technical training. I once attended a course over in the United States for VSAT engineering. I was a VSAT technician. And it's a 4-day technician's course for support staff that were going to maintain these satellite systems. There's 1,800 PowerPoint slides in 4 days. And we only got to actually hands on the equipment on the afternoon of the 4th day because it took us that long to get through the PowerPoint slides. Terrible. There's no excuse for that kind of thing. So we need great material. So how do we get great material? Well, the first thing is the instructional designers. They need to have the same level of skills, a dedication to their craft, which is creating content. We need to determine who the target audience is for the training that we're delivering. Okay, so who is it that we're training? What is it they need to know at the end of this training? When they walk out this door, what's the attitude change that we're trying to create? From that, we define learning objectives. And once we've got the learning objectives, we create the content to deliver the objectives. We need to introduce something called a narrative, the story of the training that we're trying to deliver. What is the story that's in there? And if it's not designed into the content, you as a trainer need to try and bring that narrative out. It's really important. At the end of that, we've got create the exam to test knowledge of the learning objectives. So they're the 3 key things. And again, this quite often isn't looked into. It's just let's put some PowerPoints together, get up and read them out and hope that people are going to understand. The failing is in this process. If it doesn't happen, then people are not going to be able to go back and do their jobs differently, which is what we're trying to achieve. There needs to be a measurable effect, i.e., how do we normally test or monitor or measure whether training's been a success? At the end of the week, we do a survey, and what the bosses do, they look down and see, has the instructor scored high enough points? Did they like the instructor? Is that a true measure of success of training? And it's not. The measure of success is when people go back into the workplace and they change their attitudes and their behaviours, they do their job differently, and they start to perform the tasks that you've trained them to do. So what's a good way to measure, for example, if your training's been effective? If you train on a vendor, then at the end of that training, are the support calls lower, for example? That's a way of measuring the success. And again, we don't define that into our process often enough, and we don't understand that that's what we're trying to achieve. And how do you do that? It's follow-up after the course is finished. So that entire process should be written in and thought about and considered by anybody who's actually creating content. So you as the trainer, that's often not your job. But what will happen is you'll get given content. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is my mind map. I'm currently developing the new Smart Zone content for Ruckus. And so this is my objective. So we come up with the objectives first. And if you look at that, we drill down. And we can see just on the Smart Zone discovery side, we can see here where we've got the different objectives within the chapter, broken up into labs. Each of these represents an anchor point within the PowerPoint slides, all tied to a learning objective. If we look at the lab exercises, we can see they're interspersed. It's not a whole lab, a whole section with the labs at the end. We've actually got the labs in the middle to try and anchor those knowledge points. And here is the tasks that we'll be performing in the lab. So all of our content gets designed along these lines. And if it's not designed along those lines, then it's going to be harder for you to subconsciously, as the student, remember those points. So again, really key. Third thing that you need as an instructor is great instructor skills. So how do we get that? Well, we all talk about the 802.11 standard, and we're all here shaking our heads at the bar, tutting about poor Wi-Fi installs, and we all say, if only that guy knew about the 802.11 standard or was CWNA trained, or did some design training, his network would be superb. We wouldn't be troubleshooting it. What about the 802.11 for trainers? It's called the Ibs Tpi Competencies. And this is the 802.11 of training. Gives you 5 knowledge domains. Okay? Within these knowledge domains, you are supposed to understand the theory within those domains and apply them when you train. If you want to go forward and take this training, the CompTIA CTT Plus is the exam that's based on these objectives. And in order to become CompTIA certified, you do a 20-minute video that you submit, and within that video, you have to demonstrate knowledge of and application of all of these domains. For me, the biggest one here is a questioning technique. Demonstrate effective questioning skills. If I coach someone as a trainer, the biggest thing I say, the thing that you can make the most difference in how well you are coming across as a trainer is to improve your questioning technique. So if you learn this method, it goes a long way towards improving your trainer skills. Now, we have an ATP program at Ruckus. What it means is that we allow certain distributors to provide training, and all the ATP trainers have to go through a program with us where we do a one-day instructional skills class. Now, I myself am CompTIA certified. It was a 5-day training class just on trainer techniques. So we boiled it down into one day, but we stay within the IBS TPI domain so that people understand that we're teaching them a sort of watered-down version of a very well-known theory or very well-known standard. So that's the training that we give to our Ruckus. And we've actually got a couple of guys here that have been through the ISD class. Kuhn is here. Is Kuhn here? Kuhn Verbeck? Yeah, he's maybe not here. And Christian Fabina? Yeah, so Christian's been through it. So feel free to ask these guys what they thought of the training, how it affected their and improved their delivery skills. So I just want to give you a couple of examples of things we look at. So here's the classroom layout. How many times does anybody look at a classroom and think the table layout is integral to people's learning ability? Well, it is. So here what we've done is we've changed the table layout, the way that people interact with each other. We have put some bits and bobs on the table. Every single thing on that table is there for a specific reason, to assist learning. And if you're a trainer and you don't know what those represent, then again, you should really go back and look at the theory behind things like colour, touch, aesthetics, all that sort of stuff. Another thing is, this comes back to course design, but also for yourselves, is how you facilitate learning. And again, too many times it's death by PowerPoint. But what we've got here is an exercise where we, instead of telling someone something, we give it to them as a task and we put them into pairs. And these are students. This is live in a class. They didn't know I was recording them. So they're working together to define some specific objectives that I want them to know. So you see how they collaborate. They're talking to each other. They're not just sat there. This ISD class, by the way, there's no PowerPoints. The entire class for one day is all instructor interaction. So they're the guys going through it. Okay, so great instructor skills. You need to know the instructional theory yourselves as trainers. And you need to commit to being the best. I have a folder like this. I read it every time I go to teach a course, and every time I finish a course, I get back and I read my notes in the folder and I think, what did I do wrong? What could I do better? Did I ask questions correctly? Did I give students the opportunity to learn what we're trying to do for them? Great material works with the trainer, bad material fights against you as a trainer. So there we go. So there's the 3 things that you need: credibility, great instructor skills, and great material. Now, wherever you're positioned on here as a trainer, those 3 areas are where you should be asking questions and driving your own knowledge and ability to become much stronger as a trainer. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @WirelessLANPros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter @KeithRParsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.